Joining us is Anita Irvin, the Executive Director of Insight's Memory Care in Sterling, Virginia?
Fairfax.
Or Fairfax, Virginia. It's an adult day for seniors that are dealing with Alzheimer's disease or other cognitive impairments. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's truly my pleasure, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you. So, adult day. You have a full house there, I know. It is something that many families, they don't even know it exists. So talk to me a little bit about adult day as it relates to dementia and what is a typical day?
So Insight Memory Care Center is an adult day that's licensed for about 60 participants per day. We typically do an intake with our participants prior to them enrolling so that we understand a little bit about where they're at cognitively. We can really program person-centered care and what have you. Insight has 3 different levels within our day center, serving both the moderate stage to the late stage of the disease process. We have 2 nurses on board that help with the health monitoring of our participants. We serve breakfast and lunch and a couple snacks. And in the midst of that, we have 3 different groups. And so depending upon where they're at cognitively would depend upon which group they're in and the level of care they need. So a typical day could look like they show up at 7:30. We're open from 7:30 to 5:30. We have some folks that show up at 10 o'clock. So it's really that person-centered approach that's really important. So I'm not necessarily an early riser, you may be. So it really ebbs and flows to what works for that individual. But we could start with at 10 o'clock with music and trivia and dancing and arts and crafts and just a lot of different activities that allows our participants to function at their highest level for as long as they can. And I think it's just a fantastic way for them to have concrete purpose and structure each day and come and feel useful still. We all need to be needed and we all want to be useful. And just because you have a dementia diagnosis doesn't mean that you can't feel any of that. And so adult day really brings that piece home.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the reason that we at our organization feel, it's just such an important thing for families to know is that there's a huge benefit to the caregiver.
Yeah.
So personally, I'll tell you a little bit about our personal story. My parents moved to a senior community, and my dad already had his diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, but they moved to a community that has your independent living, and then you can step down to assisted living and memory care. At the time, it was new. It was brand new, and the independent living was completed, but the rest of it was not. And my dad was an exit seeker. So he would wander, and they would call it was weekly, daily, sometimes a couple of times a day. Michelle, your dad is wandering again, and we're just not in a position to have someone with Alzheimer's who is a wanderer living in this community because it's a construction zone. It's not safe for him. It's not safe for him to get lost in the building. It's not safe for him to not know how to use the elevator. And my mom didn't like confrontation. So she would rather let him go and then deal with it later than argue, right? So this became a real problem, and they finally came to us and said, if you don't make arrangements for your dad or to my mom, your husband, you will no longer be able to live here. And you can understand, they had a pond and construction. So it was at that moment that the physician told my mom, have you considered adult day? And we had no idea that was even an option. We're like, what is that? And they explained to us, essentially exactly what it sounds like. An adult day, a facility that works with people with dementia, keeping them active, allowing you to have time to yourself. So we were lucky at the time that the adult day in our area did not have a waiting list, and we were able to do that. And my dad was there 5 days a week, and it gave my mom this opportunity to take care of herself. And the doctor, was very clear to us and said, your mom is struggling so much. She's not eating, she's not sleeping, she's so stressed out. So, we see the benefit, and I just want families to understand, what do you see as the greatest benefit to the caregiver?
I think one of the biggest things that we see when people start to inquire for our services is we see a caregiver that's stressed out. They've gotten a diagnosis. They're like, what do I do now? What am I supposed to do? My husband or my dad is agitated and I don't know how to deal with the behaviors, right? And so they're stressed out, so they're not sleeping. Exactly what you're describing that your mom went through. And so we see, once we get them enrolled in a program, we see the caregiver stress totally de-escalate because they have a break. They can do some of the productive things they got to do to keep their own life moving forward. And then they can really take care of that self-care piece, which is so critical for caregiving. People don't take time for themselves, and I'm a living example of that right now,
so
right? And so I'm caring for my mom and dad right now, and so I'm working full time and what have you. And when is there me time? There's very little. So really making sure that we're giving that respite time, and typically once they start to enroll for a couple days, we typically see those days increase once they see the benefit of it. They're like, oh, so I can do this and take care of this and do some self-care. And so really is that respite piece and that self-care piece that we see that's so beneficial to the caregiver.
Right, absolutely. So one of the things that you gain, you gain that opportunity for respite, you gain that opportunity to take care of yourself, you gain that opportunity to know that your loved one is cared for, safe, and is safe.
And it gives you peace of mind, right?
And it's that peace of mind piece. But along with that, I think you also have the concern of change, right? Yeah. So I think there's a lot of families that worry, like, it's hard for me to change anything in this daily structure. So what is that going to do both for my loved one, but also myself? Like, how do you deal with that?
I think we do a lot of education with our caregivers, because that's what we hear is mom came and, oh, she doesn't want to come back, right? And so any change is going to take a period of time to help with that consistency and that structure and building trust and all of those fun things. And so we really have to partner with a care partner to come up with the right story and the right approach to get somebody to come in. Maybe it's they're coming to volunteer and help us out. Again, pulling on that purpose and that self-worth piece is really key. But then working with that participant when they come in and working with them one-on-one, doing some person-centered stuff. And then on the flip side of it, spending some time with a care partner, doing some education that this is normal dementia. It's not abnormal. You and I can deal with change on an everyday basis, but somebody who's cognitively impaired, it's really hard to deal with change. And so it's really that education piece and spending time with those participants and giving some time for that transition and to happen. It's going to take 30 days or so to really get on board.
So that's the important piece, right? Like, don't get discouraged.
No.
Don't get discouraged. First of all, don't be fearful.
Right.
Because you'll never know if you don't try, right?
Right.
So if you give yourself 30 days, and that's a kind of a good roadmap. Give yourself 30 days and just try it out and see what happens. And most likely, what's going to happen is exactly what we talked about.
Right.
They're going to adjust. They're going to look forward to it. I, just assuming I'm a caregiver, now have an opportunity to take care of myself, take my own doctor visits,
right,
do things I love to do, meet with my friends. That is just such a great benefit. I worry, the change piece is hard because sometimes change adds a whole new layer of stress. Yeah. So, as a caregiver and for our families, I want them to understand that, it's that change, there's such a good benefit on the other side of it. Yeah. And with that comes like consistency and new friends, because if you're saying that you have 3 different levels, and so they begin to see faces. Yeah. Familiar faces.
They make new friends. And then what's really nice about Adult Day too is when care partners or caregivers are dropping their loved one off, they connect with other caregivers.
Right.
And there's this affirmation of, I'm not by myself and I can connect. And, oh, you're going through this too. And this is where I'm struggling with, oh, let me tell you how I got through this. And really sharing those stories. Those are key interactions that are so important for folks going through this journey.
That's a really good point. A really good point. I know my dad, every time I would take him, it was a journey. It was a journey. I would take him and he would tell my mom he didn't want to go. Yeah. And I would come and I would pick him up and I would take him. And in the beginning, because I asked him, he would go. He wouldn't go for my mom, but he would go for me. Over time, that changed and he didn't want to go at all. But he never lost his desire, like his desire to please. So everyone's different. So I think you can kind of tap into different personalities. But for us, he didn't lose that part. And so I would say to him, you know, Dad, I have to help them in the library, and I could really use your help. And he would say, oh, you need my help? You know, yeah. And just something as little as that, you know, would get in. There was a couple of times that it was a smaller adult day center than Insights, but there was a couple of times where I would call in advance and be like, can you do me a favor? Like, take all the books out. Like, just take a pile of books out and we'll fix it, and give me 20 minutes, you know?
And I think
we'll fix it.
Yeah, that's a great way for care partners and the staff to partner, right? For that person-centered approach. And we have families that call for the same type of thing. Hey, we're struggling this morning. This is kind of where we're at. And so we can get on board to help that person get through the door that day.
Right, right. So, and I don't want to lose sight of the value of the friendships that are made with the caregiver. Yeah. Because there's nothing, you know, there's nothing worse than feeling like you're in this alone. And the beauty of things that we do, even at our organization, you know, social hours and things like that, memory cafes that we've supported, is that you can meet with people that are going through the same journey, and you don't need to explain. Yeah. There's a lot of value in that. So I think people inherently know, if I'm going to take my loved one to his or her adult day center today, everyone that I come in contact with, I don't have to explain. Right. Right. You know,
they understand.
They understand. Right. They're going through the same thing.
Yep.
So there's a tremendous value in that too. So another thing that in our case, in our family, which I'll use as an example because it was so valuable to us, do you often feel that having someone in an adult day program can prolong the time between, you know, the time before they might need to move into a memory care? Do you see that?
I do, and I have an interesting perspective because I was an executive director of memory care for 25 years. Okay. So I saw it on that end. Now I'm on the adult day center end. And so what I noticed in my career in memory care was people that didn't know about adult day were placing much earlier, and people that have placed in adult day are placing much later or at all. So we have 3 different levels, and we've cared for people, some people to the very end stages where they're on hospice and providing home care and help the family put that support system in place. So yeah, it does prolong the placement or the placement at all.
Or maybe the placement doesn't happen at all.
Yeah.
Because why does the placement need to happen? You know, the placement happens because we cannot do it anymore. Right. You know, the level of care is much greater than what we're able to provide. Yep. So if you have that help and education that you receive on the back end, and the support group, super important. Do you when you work with families, do you put together care plans and help them, you know, are there care plans involved?
Absolutely. So in the state of Virginia, we're required to do a care plan every 6 months. Insight does ours every 3. And then if there's any changes in behavior or activities of daily living or participation or things like that, we're notifying the families on an ongoing basis because they're going to progress through our programs, as well as we take monthly weights and vitals and things like that. So if we notice something's off, we're able to communicate and help the families make sure that we have a plan in place, or if they need to see a doctor, things like that.
That's great. I'm assuming everyone knows what a care plan is, but maybe they don't. So
that's
can
a really good point.
Talk to me just a little bit about, you know, what is a care plan and why should we care about that?
So the care plan is literally what it says. It's a plan of care that we talk about how you're going to adjust to the day center, what your toileting needs are, what your diet needs are, what program you're going to be in, what your psychosocial needs are, what your rec therapy plan is, and how we're going to approach that individually for that individual. So my plan might be tailored to dogs because I love dogs. Yours might be tailored to football because you love football, and so rec therapy piece. So it's really designed specifically for each individual. And then once it's developed, we go over that with the care plan, with the caregiver, and then we update it on an ongoing basis.
So the value and the importance of the updating is that things are changing. So if you start to see something that's alarming, because you know far more than the normal family might know. You know, right. we know what we know up to this stage, yep. right? But you've seen the stages progress. So then you can help families, you know, and let them kind of give them a heads up and let them know that you're seeing something that they that might be concerning, right?
Yeah, or are you seeing, toileting accidents at home, or I'm struggling with this at home? Are you guys seeing it at the day center? Well, what approaches can we do? And really coming together to help that enhance that quality of life for as long as we can. It's really a great tool to help both parties.
Right, right. It's so valuable to the caregivers. I can't even talk about it. I mean, I can't talk about it enough. And that kind of leads me down the road too of the health and wellness of the caregiver, right? I think we can assume that it's better for the caregiver, but let's talk a little bit deeper about that. The idea that you have a safe place to put your loved one, where they're going to receive care, and what that means to your health and your well-being.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share personally, my dad was diagnosed last year, and I've been in this business a long time. Thought I knew it, thought I got it, but you hear that individual diagnosis and it's like piercing in your heart.
Yeah, stabbed you in the heart.
It does. And so, taking that time and realizing my own journey and where I was and seeing how I was dealing with it, putting myself in a spouse's shoe. That's just my dad, but a spouse's shoe, that's even more intense, right? So typically we see folks that are coming to us stressed out, depressed. I mean, who wouldn't be depressed seeing a loved one getting a diagnosis and what have you? But then you engage them in a program, and you're starting to get that respite care, and you're starting to really start to see the peace of mind that it's bringing you, because your loved ones, the quality of life is enhanced. You're having a little bit of balance for yourself, what have you, and whatnot, and able to connect with other caregivers, like I shared before, right? 2021, 90% of our caregivers said that they had more peace of mind because of our adult day center than they did prior to enrolling.
That's amazing.
That's
amazing.
That number right there just speaks volumes of the value of adult day.
That's amazing. I think you touched on something else too, which, I don't want to go down the medical path of depression, but again, speaking of personal experience, my dad really, really struggled with depression and thoughts of taking his own life. He talked about it every day. He was going to end it. That's what he said. He was going to end it. When he used to wander or exit seek, he would wander, he would say he was going north. So he would get up every day, pick up a shirt or a pair of pants, put it over his arm, and say he was going north. And we did not understand. We're like, where are you going, Dad? Like, where's north? Well, he grew up in New York. He served in the Marines as a young man. So what we started to uncover as this journey kind of took us deeper was that he wanted to go back home, but he wanted to connect with his Marine buddies because they know how to kill people. And he said that. It's been a minute, so I can talk about this much more matter-of-factly than at the time.
Yeah.
But, he knew. He knew. His mother had Alzheimer's. My mom and my dad were the primary caregiver of my grandmother. She lived with them when she had Alzheimer's back in the day when you didn't get a diagnosis until autopsy. But they dealt with all of the stress of everything. So he knew what this meant for his family. And I think if I could guess that his depression really stemmed around the idea that he knew that this diagnosis would create a burden for his family.
Yeah.
Right? And he knew that, and he carried that. I think that may be why he didn't really fight too hard about memory care, because I think he didn't want to be there, but I think he knew that being there was the best thing for my mom, right?
Yeah.
So my point in going down that path is the programs at, the benefit to the caregiver, which is really what our focus is, but I think it's important to note that the value of having your loved one involved in activities, making friends, having purpose, having to go, 1, 2, 3, however many days a week, almost like it's a job. I think it benefits them, which means when they come home after that day, it's again less stress for the caregiver.
For sure.
Right.
Typically they're exhausted. Mm-hmm. They've had a great day. and they're tired and they want to go to bed, hopefully, and they're sleeping through the night, right? So yeah, I think it's twofold. I think you have depression on both sides for sure, and making sure that we're engaging that and addressing that as early as we can is important.
Right. And I think the care plans, again, one of the reasons why I like the idea that you do care plans is, you know, my dad, he didn't want to go. I would take him there. He would love it every minute. The whole way home when I picked him up, he would talk about how much he loved it, what they did. I did this, we had fun, we did this. The minute I left and he was with my mom, I'm not going back. They don't feed me, nobody talks to me. And I was there like hours that day.
Right.
You know, so I'm like, really? That's the brain of a person with dementia, right?
It is.
So I really want families to understand, like, please don't reconsider, you know, an adult day program because they don't like it.
Right.
Because chances are much higher that they actually love it. But this is just what the brain of a person with dementia does.
Yeah. In
the same way that your own mom or someone who's cleaned your house for a lifetime comes over and suddenly they're stealing from you.
Right.
No, they're not.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I'm your daughter. I'm not stealing. I promise you I did not take money out of your wallet.
Right.
You know, that's just the brain of unfortunately, you know, so I really hope that families can understand, you know, don't get discouraged because you really want to look at what you're hearing from you guys, you know, from the Adult Day Center, and also what you're seeing as far as like health and wellness, right? What's the benefit to me as the caregiver? What's the benefit to my mother or father? You know, chances are that benefit is far greater than my dad saying nobody feeds me.
Right.
That's funny. I sat with him at lunch, you know.
Right.
You know, it's just, I'm like, Mom, I promise you, like, I was there at lunch and he ate lunch, you know.
Well, and we have, you know, families that'll say, you know, Dad doesn't want to come back, or my loved one doesn't want to come back, right? And I'll say to the rec staff, hey, get some good photos of total engagement, what have you, then send it to the family. Let's put some proof in the pudding there and actually show that engagement, right? And so there you go.
That's interesting. So as part of, you know, speaking to that, especially in this world, you know, I want to say post-COVID, but is it post-COVID? Because I think we're still in the middle of it. But in this world, this crazy world where we all shut down, including yourself, you know, we had to shut down all of our in-person things for a time period and learn how to do things virtually and learn how to reach caregivers in their homes. And I'm sure you worked hard at educating caregivers on how to stay sane when you don't have their loved one in an adult day setting. So that being said, do you encourage or do you find that adult children, you know, that more family units are wanting to be involved in conversations, or do you deal mostly with just a spouse or the primary caregiver?
No, we're finding more family is being involved at this point. Our support groups increased astronomically when we went virtual. Even our education for our care partners throughout the community astronomically went through the roof because people were tuned in and they needed help. We were the only day center that closed only for 3 months. Our families needed a service,
right?
And I said to my team, "We got to figure it out, and we got to come to the table, and we got to figure it out quickly." And so we were able to reopen our doors June of 2020. We've been open ever since, being able to serve people, and I couldn't be more proud of my team right now.
Absolutely. Have you had to shut down again at all during that time
No.
period? That's amazing.
No,
that's amazing. That's, you know, actually amazing. So I think that, you know, as a family, again, we all lived, my parents, 4 children, you know, we all lived far away. Mm-hmm. And so when we wanted to get involved in care and we wanted to help, we didn't know about any of this.
Right.
We also didn't know about social workers that can come to your home. We didn't know about home care that can provide almost like a sitter to help. We didn't know any of that. We thought if we're going to help with the care, that means we need to physically help with the care.
Right.
And I want to encourage families, especially adult children, to know that, you know, if you want to know more and you want to understand more, you know, there's many ways that you can still connect virtually. You know, and you probably should, you know. There's the obvious things like our family's financial situation. Parents don't talk to their kids about their financial situation.
No, they don't.
So, you know, opportunities have arisen virtually with, telemedicine, telefinancial advice, therapy, that allow families to kind of join together even though they're not in the same place. So I think that we, have another generation to educate on, what kind of help we can provide to our aging parents, when there's a Alzheimer's diagnosis.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're just going through it now,
Yeah.
and your parents are here, they're local. But imagine what it would be like if they were in Florida.
Yeah.
And that's what we get, and that's what we deal with a lot. And we also deal with spouses. They want to protect their children. So parents want to protect their children, so therefore they don't tell them just how dire things are. So months go by, maybe it's a holiday where the whole family gets together at the holiday, and we get a phone call. We're like, holy moly, my mom, I knew that my mom was forgetful, but my mom is bad, and my dad can't do this anymore.
Right.
What do we do, And so, we really want to figure out ways to educate families much earlier, and let them know that, there's so much available for you, so many resources available. Adult Day is available for your parent. I'm just assuming, just say it to dad, your mom can get respite, your mom can, you can't, it's not overnight respite,
right.
So
right.
you can't travel, but you know what, if you're a grandmother and you want to do things at your grandchildren's school, you can do that again.
Yeah.
Whereas that wasn't happening.
No, and I think one of the other programs, and I don't know if people are aware of this, Michelle, but one of the great programs when you're first diagnosed is called the SHARE program. And so that program is a 5-week program where you can sit down with the SHARE counselor, with the person that's diagnosed and their caregiver, and they talk about, the person with the diagnosis can talk about what they want through this journey. Mm-hmm. Now, whether it really maps out or not is a whole different thing, but it gives them a little bit of control and a bit of say-so on kind of what this looks like as we're going. It's one of the best programs out there to empower both the caregiver and that person with diagnoses.
And ultimately, giving up control is tough.
It is tough, especially for men.
It's very tough. It's tough for men, and it's also tough for, I think it's tough for adult children.
Yeah.
Because they, and I think a lot of denial that happens, at least it's my opinion, is, the denial happens because they don't want to give up the idea and the control of their strong father.
Right.
You know what I
right,
mean?
Right.
So my father was my father.
Provider, protector, all of that, right?
All of that, all of the advice, the mentorship, all of the things. They don't want to give up that. And as a result, it can not be good.
No, and it inhibits decisions, that's for sure.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, every family, especially these days, I think prices of everything are going up in the world, so the cost of everything can be a little bit overwhelming when you're talking about memory care and private pay, so programs like your Adult Day program, is any part of it covered by insurance, by Medicare, or is it private pay?
So Medicare doesn't pay for Adult Day. Our fees range from $1,300 to $3,200 a month, depending on the level of care. Insight is mission-based. We're a nonprofit. We really believe in serving people, and so one of the focuses that we have purposely done through our history is put $250,000 in our budget every year to serve people who can't afford our services.
That's amazing.
And this year we got another grant from the county for an additional $90,000. So we're hoping to give away about $350,000 this year to families who can't afford it but desperately need the service. And so really we're just committed to serving. That's
amazing. That's just so amazing. And I think, the programs across the country, just like pricing across the country, are very different.
Correct.
I think just my dad, memory care when my dad was there was about half of what it is in the Washington D.C. area now.
Yeah.
So it's very different across the country, but that's certainly something that a family, should ask, right? They should not assume
No.
that if they find an adult day program local in their area, they should not assume that if it's not within their budget that they wouldn't offer some sort of financial help. They should at least ask, what's the worst thing?
Right, and they should ask, do you accept Medicaid? Because there are some adult days that do accept Medicaid, and so there are programs for that. So yeah, you should ask the question for sure.
Always ask.
Yeah.
Always ask. What's the worst thing they can say? No.
Okay.
And I think across the board. Do you have any programs that engage grandchildren? Are you seeing that? 'Cause the reason I'm asking is because we have, and maybe this is more on the support group side, but we're seeing more and more younger diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and not just young onset Alzheimer's where it's affecting maybe your children, because maybe you have high school children, you're in your 50s or 60s, but younger people that have younger grandchildren. And I wonder if do you offer or do you kind of roll into any of your programming things for grandchildren, or is that something you've ever thought about?
We haven't done it as of yet, but I think there's some great potential as we continue to evolve our services and what have you to do those type of things. I mean, sending home, when we're not going to be open for a holiday or whatever, some arts and crafts that they could do together would be fantastic, some projects that they could work on together. But we haven't embarked on that quite yet.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
I think that, I think one of the big gaping holes, and honestly, it's not related to Adult Day. This is just your dad has dementia. My dad had dementia. Is, the idea that, it has an impact. If nothing else, just the behavior changes in a grandparent has such an impact, and we really, can probably do better at helping families sort of understand and how to communicate that to the younger generations, so that it's not so scary. I think it's scary.
Yeah, it is.
Or it can be.
Yeah.
It
especially
can be.
if the kids don't have any inclination, right? It's really trying to educate them on their level.
Right.
No matter where they're at.
So what about, and again, this is related to your to Insight's memory care, which may be different in other parts of the country. But in your 3 levels, do you have a requirement on how many days someone can you attend an adult day 1 day a week, or is it like a 2 or 3 day a week program?
We typically ask for 2 days a week as a minimum, because we feel like that structure is going to help both the participant, and the respite's going to help the caregiver. Typically what we see is once they enroll in 2 days, you're looking at about 45 days to 60 days, and they're increasing their days because they realize the benefit, and it's a win-win for both sides.
Right.
So we do have some folks that come all 5 days, and we have some folks that choose 2 or 3 or 4 days a week.
It's difficult, right? It's difficult. The change and the stress and the, all of that is very difficult when you're only doing it 1 day a week.
It is.
And it's probably better for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we really talk about, especially those 2 days a week. Is it a Friday? Is it a Monday before the weekend? Before and after the weekend? Is that going to help you as a caregiver? So we kind of strategically look at, okay, what do you got going out through the week to kind of help them pick which days are going to be best for both of them.
I also want to kind of tap into, and we didn't talk about this before, but my brother and I actually have come to Insights to do like the Alzheimer's
virtual dementia
tour.
Mm-hmm.
So
did you go psychotic? I did.
I didn't. I did. Neither one of us did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, neither one of us did. And so we walked away from that and we're like, okay, that was super interesting. There was definitely super interesting, but I didn't go psychotic, or get agitated like others have talked about. But the reason I bring that up is because, I want people to understand that, the education piece for the caregiver can be much greater than, or the benefit to the caregiver can be much greater than just the respite time, because you offer other educational programs that, help families. The virtual dementia tour will help families understand, like, what is he, like, what's happening here?
Right. So we do, yeah, we do monthly free seminars for care partners, and anybody can attend those. They don't have to be part of Insight to do that. Can attend, whenever, and they range anywhere from normal aging to dementia to communication to newest research to end of life. So we're hopefully preparing people to go through this journey. Plus, the support groups are really important to connect with other people and really talk about that piece of it. So those pieces are really key, but the virtual dementia tour I think is really important to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to understand, well, why are they responding that way possibly? Well, they could be in pain, they could be hungry and they can't tell you, they could be thirsty and they can't tell you, and there's all this stuff metabolically going on that they sometimes can't communicate, and behavior has meaning to it. We just got to figure out what it means.
So, that kind of brings me to a story that I remember with my dad that would not have happened had we not had a care plan in place. And that was my dad suddenly, for no reason, just started walking around like this. Walking around like this. And he'd put his hand on his head and he'd walk around. He never complained. He never seemed like he was in pain. He never saw. We got a call, and through the care plan saying, hey, are you noticing this at home? And, my mom, yes, I have been noticing it, but, it just seemed like a weird thing, it just seemed like a weird behavior that because he wasn't appearing to be agitated, like we didn't really put any merit to it.
Right.
And through the care plan at the Adult Day Center, they said, we're gonna recommend that you just give him some time, like maybe it's a headache. Maybe he has a headache.
Yeah,
he doesn't seem like he's in pain, but whatever. Gave him Tylenol, the hand came down. So, these are kind of things that I think when you're in the day-to-day of it, just like the day-to-day of raising your children, and they grow a foot and you don't really notice. Someone comes to visit and they're like, you're so tall. And I'm like, really? Like, they didn't grow to me. You're in the day-to-day. I don't think we're attentive to the idiosyncrasies, changes. We're not. That's different. You see it all the time. You not pay attention to little things. And I think we sometimes just think they're idiosyncrasies when, in fact, a professional may see a bigger issue. Right? I would agree. And we've talked about this in some of our other conversations, and we'll talk about this more, moving forward. But families, especially like a spouse. The person with dementia, like they're letting their guard down. They're not going to listen to their wife or husband as much as they would listen to you. 1000%. We're raised that way. We let our home is our safe place. Yep. So our safe place, we can let loose and we can sometimes have our worst behavior, and we know that they're going to love us anyway. You know. Yeah. But when you're put into a situation where you're getting guidance from someone else, or you're, under the eye of someone other than your spouse or other than your primary caregiver, chances are, you may see a completely different behavior, and you also may see a completely different response, right? For sure. To what you're asking. Typically, they're more amenable. Much more. Oh, right? Can you help me? Oh, sure. Right. Where the spouse asks, they're like, oh, heck no. No, heck no. Heck no. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's right. So, again, you're in the Northern Virginia, Fairfax area. I know you've done some expansion, and you're in Loudoun County, Virginia now. Yeah. You have a program out there. But what about families in other parts of the country? What is your recommendation on where would they go to find an adult day center? So we've done a lot of education with doctors, neurologists, what have you, because we're finding that when the doctor gives a diagnosis, the family sits there and goes, now what? So Insight actually put together a complete checklist on, once a diagnosis happens, kind of steps you should be taking care of. But physicians are a great resource.
The county resources like AAA's, Area Agency on Aging are a great resource. Care managers are a great resource. We get a lot of referrals from word of mouth. People that have been served by Insight, they're telling other people, hey, it's a great resource. You should look at this to serve your loved one, what have you. So those are the areas that we see a lot of referrals from.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So what advice do you have? Like what is, like, is there anything that you want families to know? Primarily families that have no idea. This is the first time they're hearing about it. They didn't even know this was an option.
I would say that Adult Day is probably the biggest opportunity for people to take advantage of that they don't know about. And the staff that work in Adult Day are amazing angels. Most of them are there for the right reason, care and compassion. They want to serve, they want to give back, and typically they're totally mission-based, right? We want to just give back and help families. And so really explore the opportunity. Explore the opportunity, ask the questions. You don't know until you don't ask. So go out and ask some questions. Get somebody who's a neutral party. Ask those broad questions. What can I do for my loved one? But I think there's a lot more opportunity for people to take advantage of early in the disease process, which could possibly slow down the disease a tad bit. We don't have research to show that. But I do think that people that are engaged at a higher level, you see them stay at a higher level for a little longer, for sure. And I just think there's a lot of resources out there for people that they don't know about.
So Areas for the Aging is an example of that. You know, again, a lot of the phone calls that we get, they're like, we don't know what to do. Where do we go? You know, I think the first call that many make would be like to the Alzheimer's Association.
Yep.
Because they are like, I don't know what to do. So they'll go to the Alzheimer's Association and they'll look around and, you know, try to figure out what that means for them, right? And how that can help. But what, you know, what we want to do is make sure that they understand that almost every county, if not everything, but it should be almost every county across our country has an office for the aging, an area for the aging. You know, there's someone who's responsible for the elderly community in that area, right? And so, you know, that's a really good place to start, because they would be the ones that would know about, you know, an adult day program. They would know about care managers, social workers, you know, those types of things. So that's a really good place to start. And I think, you know, understanding that you don't have to do it alone and that there are all kinds of resources available to you. And I think the biggest takeaway on the idea of it being afraid, you know, that maybe you can't afford it is, you know, just ask. Just ask. Yeah. The answer might be no, but just ask. Yeah. You know, just ask.
I mean, Fairfax County is a great example of that. They have adult day centers, right? And so people will go to them because they're cheaper. But if they get to a point in the disease process that they're no longer able to be served, typically they'll refer them to us. And most of the time we're bringing those folks to our financial aid assistance fund to still be able to get the resources they need, but get the care they need so they can stay in adult day.
You know, that's a really good point that we didn't touch on, and that is senior centers. So a lot of people, maybe they think that a senior center is the same thing as an adult day. Very different.
Very different.
Very different. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So the senior centers are more independent, not typically licensed by the state, more a social program, people that are more independent, whereas an adult day is a licensed program regulated by the Department of Health, coming in, surveying. There's a medical model typically to it, that type of thing.
Exactly. And I think, you know, senior centers, while wonderful, you know, and they serve, you know, a great purpose, it is, it's completely independent.
Correct.
Right? So it's almost like you are getting dropped off at the rec center.
Correct.
Kind of, you know, you're getting dropped off at the rec center. So you're not going to get a care plan. You're not going to have, you know, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but you also don't often know if they'll, like, walk out the door. You know, there's safety measures, you know, so I think as much as we as caregivers and families need a break, we need to understand that when we're, you know, going down the path of, you know, caring for someone with dementia, we need to make sure that they're in a safe environment.
For sure.
You know, so that is more than just an environment where they're getting stimulated and they're, you know, it's a safe environment so that they can't walk out the door or, you know, they're picked. This is, you know, we actually got a call, this was, you know, a year and a half ago, from someone who was putting their grandmother on a transit bus to go to the senior center, because she's always gone to the senior center, but now she has dementia.
Oh.
And she's just like goes to the senior center, and you know, almost like this anxiety happens, and I'm like, okay, how can I broach this without coming across the wrong way? But you know, this is, you know, the adult day center is not intended to have someone the senior center, the intent of the senior center is not to have someone with dementia dropped off at the front door, you know, so that you as a caregiver can get some respite. It's not safe. Right. And it's not safe in a physical way. Correct. You know, in the sense that they, you know, many people with dementia are exit seekers, and they might wander, and they might not remember where they're supposed to go and who's supposed to pick them up, and you know, all the things. So, you know, I want to make sure people understand that there's a very big difference between a senior center and an adult day, especially an adult day that is working with dementia specific. For sure. 1000%. Yeah. So what am I missing? Am I missing anything?
No, I think we hit adult day as a whole. You know, the one thing that I would like to throw out there for folks in this wonderful COVID time that we live in, right, is that we developed an online early stage program. And so that's still up and running right now, and people can tap into that throughout the U.S. So we send out brain fitness and brain health stuff, and they connect on Zoom and they get together, and it's a great way for that MCI, that early diagnosed person, to stay totally engaged with having some productive tasks during the day and still giving a little bit of respite to that caregiver even at home. So that's out there too. So if people need information like that, please reach out to Insight, because we'd be happy to serve people.
Oh, absolutely. So we will link, you know, we will link your website, and we will link, and if there's any particular collateral that you'd like to send on, we're happy to do that. But I can't thank you enough for being here and taking the time. It's so important. I think it's actually honestly one of the best things that a family can do.
I agree.
Especially if you are not wanting to go down the memory care path. Yeah. I'm not saying that it's a guarantee that you won't have to do that, but it's such a great option that can buy you a lot of time, if not all the time you need. Yeah, you know? For sure. So
it allows you to kind of get your hands around the diagnosis a little bit, kind of accept it the best we can, and kind of connect with people to prepare you as you go down this journey, no matter where it takes you.
Right. So tell me again, then, how many people do you serve?
We're licensed for 60, and right now we're running at about 45. Okay. Believe it, in COVID times.
During COVID times. Yep. That's great. That's great. I know that there's been a waiting list, you know, in the past. So COVID has kind of like wreaked havoc a little bit. With that. But, you know, you should be very proud of the fact that you were able to open up after just 3 months and, you know, offer this service to families, because it's life-changing.
Agreed, 1000%. Got to be there to serve people.
Yeah. So, Anita, thank you so much for joining me and for all of this great insight. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.